Okay, so you talked about how Islam or Quran can give someone structure or value, because even if the person is a good person, if they read the Quran, or it will give them some level of guidance or calibration in their life to help better them. And that baffles me when I hear about Sharia law in Islam. And this is something that has been bugging me. I'm saying, because for me as a non-Muslim, what I see is that, are you really fighting for your God? Your God is supposed to be omnipotent, powerful God. Why can't the God choose to dispense punishment if he or she so chooses? But why do you fight? Because whenever I hear Sharia law, I hear, hanging people, chopping off people's hand, especially in the north of Nigeria. Can you talk about what's your views on Sharia law?
In the Quran, there is no Sharia law, but in tradition, there is Sharia law.
Okay.
And these are the ones which are used by the priest to hand out the punishments that we're talking about earlier, for adultery, for theft, for other things like that as well.
Okay.
Like the hand chopping. And see, can I just make another point about this, about the hand chopping as well? There is no hand chopping in the Quran. What the Quran is talking about is a metaphor. When it says that it's just like if I asked you to do something, you say, "Oh no, I'm tired today, I can't do this." That doesn't mean to say that somebody's bound you in a chair and you can't move. It just means that you're not able to do it because you've got other things to do. So in the Quran, it's about the not severing of the hand, but the cutting of the resources of a person so that they don't have the ability to commit any crime. That's what it means.
Wow.
Not the chopping of the hand. That's been changed by the hadith into the chopping of the hands, not according to the Quran.
So this is like the interpretation is very literal instead of the going deeper.
Exactly. They've literally interpreted instead of the metaphor it uses. It's about saying that, cut off the resources of this person. If a person is stealing, cut off their resources so they cannot do such harm.
This podcast came to be because I want to reignite discussions about Pan-Africanism. And the purpose is to plant seeds of unity and inspiration among Africans, both at home and in the diaspora. I believe we have come to the stage where our continent is more vulnerable than ever, and it's up to us to decide our fate moving forward. What we will come to realize, I hope, is that we're so much more alike than we're different. And this show is just a small contribution to the public discourse that is going on in Africa right now. My name is Soshima Iro, and this is the Pan-African Experience. On today's episode, I'm going to be having a conversation with Mr. Paigham Mustafa on the misrepresentation of religion, Islam, and the Quran. Mr. Mustafa spent his early working life in the printing and publishing industry. His company published the Tribune, the Buccaneer, City Life, and Asian Life, as well as many books for independent authors. He is the author of the book, The Quran, God's Message to Mankind. He edited and published several magazines, including Science International from 1991 to 2006, and Friday Standard from 1987 to 2001. Local Muslim clergy strongly objected to the content of these magazines because it questioned some of the religious practices that most people considered to be Islamic. This resulted in a written fatwa being issued against him in 2001 by the Glasgow Central Mosque in Scotland. This fatwa, which is still in place, compares him with Salman Rushdie. To date, it has not been revoked and is believed to be one of its kind in Europe. Mr. Mustafa is the director of Oxford Institute of British Islam and has written for Sunday Times, Sunday Herald, and The National. He has also been interviewed by BBC Radio Scotland to comment on current affairs with regards to Islamic topics. He has been a speaker on the Open Mosque Forum and a panelist on the Henry Jackson discussion about Sharia law. Mr. Mustafa has written and published extensively about Islam from a Quran-centric perspective. I am very grateful and honored to have Mr. Mustafa on the podcast. Mr. Paigham Mustafa, welcome to the Pan-African Experience.
Good morning, Soshima. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Okay, No problem at all. Thank you for your time. You often criticize or scrutinize certain religious practices that most people consider Islamic. And as a result of this, you were issued a fatwa by Glasgow Central Mosque here in Scotland in 2001. And I was wondering, I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about this fatwa. What is fatwa and the circumstances surrounding the issue of this fatwa to you?
Okay. Well, before this period, I was publishing some magazines. And in the magazines, I was scrutinizing and questioning the prevalent beliefs within the community, regarding what the Quran says and what Muslims are actually practicing. And I found a lot of anomalies in that. And I questioned these in the magazines as part of articles, and also asking questions about the community as well. And the clergy from that area, obviously they knew about the magazines because they've been going on for some years. And when at one point they decided that they didn't like what was happening, they didn't like this questioning. So they issued a written fatwa, which is a decree against me, to say that I was a heretic and I was blaspheming and so on, and they made very serious accusations against me. When they actually made this, I wasn't in the country, I was on holiday with my wife, but a friend, he faxed it over to me. In those days there was no internet, so he faxed it to me, and once I read it and I saw how serious it was, I came over here. Fortunately, one of the national newspapers took a hold of this story and they published it. And my MP was very sympathetic towards it. And that mitigated what might have happened had my MP and the newspapers not intervened. So it's the fatwa hasn't been removed. I've written several times to the mosque and to other people who might be able to help, but it hasn't been removed yet. So I'm still I believe the only person, maybe well, it's definitely in Britain, but maybe in Europe, who has a written fatwa decreed against it.
Okay, so you wrote this book, the Quran, God's Message to Mankind, and it was published in 2020, at least this version.
No, 2016.
Oh, 2016. It was published in 2016. But this took you like decades, I understand, for the research before you published this. Can you talk about this journey and what prompted you to write this book?
Yes. Well, when I was publishing the magazines in the late 80s and the early 90s, I was getting so much material from the readers from all over the world. They were sending me lots of stuff. And so I decided to follow some of this up, to check it, to see how solid it was. And that meant I actually traveled abroad to speak to the writers and to speak to people who were doing this research and writing to me. And this sort of accumulated over the years. And I had been thinking of publishing a book of some sort. And I thought to myself, there's no point in publishing books because there are so many books around. The best thing would be to just look at the Quran to see whether that's what it's exactly saying, or is it something else. So when I started researching, I found that the current translations of the Quran, the traditional translations of the Quran that we have, there are so many anomalies in it. There's so many misinterpretations in it. And I decided to go into it and do this research myself. And that took me about 30 years to do that. Wow. Because it's not a small task. If I'd realized it was going to take me so long, I probably wouldn't have done it. But when I started, it was so interesting. I just kept on, and I was collecting material all the time. And actually, it was in 2006 that I started to think about translating the Quran. But then I don't think the time was right because I didn't have enough information. I didn't have enough research to do that. But then I continued, although I wasn't doing anything in public. I wasn't writing for newspapers as I do now. I wasn't doing anything else. So what I did was in the background, I just kept doing the research. And the first research which I did was I published it as a private book, which was called Zapiria Islam, is mostly a glossary of all the words in the Quran, giving their correct meanings as opposed to the traditional meanings or the ones which are normally accepted. So that took me a few years, I think about 4 or 5 years to do that. And then after I had done that, so in 2014, I started writing the exposition of the Quran. And that took me about 2 years to bring all that material that I'd collected 30 years, took me 30 years to collect. So I put that all together, and that's when I published the exposition.
Yeah, I find it intriguing. Religion is something that I've looked at. Even from a very young age, I've had this struggle with it. I was raised a Catholic. In Nigeria, I grew up a Catholic. I went to mass every day. I was an altar boy. But I've always struggled with the control that religion have, especially in developing countries like mine, Nigeria. And that conflict between the concept of religion and Christianity. And the same applies to Islam as well, religion versus Islam. And in your book, which I just talked about earlier, you wrote about the difference between religion and Islam. Can you elaborate on this, please?
Yes, well, religion is about control, because religion is often considered a binding factor, but it is in reality very, very divisive. And we can see that, how facile it is, because you have one religion and then you have several sects spawning from it. And then from each sect, there are other smaller sects, subsects, So all this is happening all the time. However, when you remove the dress code, rituals, and traditions from religion, any religion, it must rely on core universal values, the very principles that bring people together, whatever their background. Religious divisions cause nothing but fear and turmoil. And it is important to understand that religions distinguish themselves by their rituals and cultural practices, while Islam as a socio-economic system has no such impediments. The difference is that a system produces measurable results, while religion cannot and was never designed to. So this in essence sets religion and Islam apart. The Quran provides the blueprint for a social and economic model that has welfare and progress of all humankind at its epicenter, a holistic solution that no religion or political structure can ever provide.
So in terms of, it's about interpretation, how people interpret Quran or how people interpret Islam.
Yes, well, see what you're saying is now, most people believe that, but the Quran is not open to that kind of interpretation. And this is the difference between the exposition which I have done and the traditional translations which are available. First of all, the reason why it can't be interpreted differently because the Quran has certain rules which have to be followed. So in my exposition, what I have done is at the beginning, I've given these rules and what these rules are and how they operate. And that's why I say the Quran is not open to the kind of interpretation which you're saying. But whereas people who are religious and believe in traditional translations of the Quran, they believe that one word can have several meanings. It's not possible. It's just not possible to do that if you follow the rules. And if they were to show which rules or how the Quran has been translated, the traditional translations would fall apart. They cannot be sustained if you apply the rules. They can only be believed if there are no rules that are applied. And that's the difference,
Wow. So, and someone that grew up with religion, we have like thousands of churches in Nigeria, for example, the same with mosque, more than 16,000 mosques and more than 60,000 churches. And these countries are often religion dominated, usually developing countries, abject poverty. And then that begs the question, if religion is true, why are these countries or these people still in this state? Where is the loss in translation?
Okay, well, that's a lot of churches and a lot of mosques, right? Why do we need so many places of worship at all? Do we really need mosques and temples all decked with gold and silver to show that the poor and hungry how much we love God? Is that how we show what our reverence is to God? Well, what these people are actually following is rites and rituals to appease God. They're not following or doing their duty to God. what the Quran says and what people practice are different things. The Quran is a practical guide and relevant to life and to progress society. It's not there for the worship of God or to appease God, because that's not what God wants. God knows what he is. God knows that he is good. So he is looking us to fulfill our duty and to fill our obligations and to fill our commitments to our family, to our society, to our country, to the world. So, and the people, what the people are doing is they're performing these rituals for personal salvation. People are following doctrines that are not based on permanent values or the core universal values. They're just interested in personal salvation, and that's what they're doing.
And what I think is, especially from the context of my country, is that because there's a lot of poverty, you know, and people are desperate, you know, and so you have all these spiritual churches, or they preach progress. You know, you come to the church, you can have some progress, you can have some money, financial progress, and everything. And there's a church called Synagogue in Nigeria, and if you see this church, Mr. Mustafa, is like gold everywhere, and it's like lights so big, and around these churches is like hot and darkness. There's no light, but at night in this church is like paved with gold and light. So I'm saying to myself, if we truly believe in religion or believe in Christianity is living a Christ-like life. And you have all these huts surrounding you. At least the least the church could have done is just to give them electricity, at least. But if you see how darkness, the surroundings of the church is darkness, and then only the church is the, you know, almost like a heaven.
No, you're absolutely right. Do you think that God needs us to put a light in the church so he can see where he is? He doesn't need that. Do you think God needs all the gold decked on his church or his mosque? He doesn't need that. So while the people outside are homeless, starving, children are in dire need, there's illness, all sorts of things are happening which shouldn't be happening outside. And there are people who are just taking in the gold and silver and using it themselves, or decking to show that God is here. That's not believing in God. To believe in God means to be fair and just and have some sort of character so that you can help people around you, your family, your community, your country, the world. This is where our money should be going, not in order to be stored in places like the church or the mosque or whatever, you know.
Yeah, yes, and there is a lot of private jets with pastors, and in Nigeria especially, a lot of private jets, and they will preach to the congregation. They will say, come to the altar, I'll pray for you for protection, God's protection, to protect you from your enemies. Yeah. And they now go home with like bodyguards and police escorts, armed bodyguards and police escorts, which is very strange.
Yeah, that's right. I went to visit a pastor here in Scotland some years ago. And I had a really good chat with him, and in fact I met him a few times, you know, and you know, and he was his you know, sermons were about how people should redeem themselves and so on as well. It's all about spiritual, but he actually the car that he had, the houses that he had, and the projects that he was talking to me about costing millions of pounds. I was absolutely surprised. I said, how can this man be talking about all these things when there is so much poverty around us, you know? He was just building up wealth for himself, basically, you know. That was his way of saying that God is good to him, you know, by using the people's money for his own good.
Yes, okay. There's a few practices in Islamic doctrine that I would like to discuss with you. You know, these are very significant practices that most people see visually all the time. And one of these practices is the wearing of burqa. And I would like you to, you know, I wanted to know what's the story and origin of burqa and whether this is mandated in the Quran.
The Hajj, so burqa, you're talking about the
burqa, yes, the covering of the face by.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand. Well, see, the hijab is a traditional Middle Eastern headdress that did not become popular until recently, when many women from other Muslim regions began to imitate their Arab sisters. They were impressed. Some thought it was trendy, and others believing it to be a religious decree, and made something that was once cultural into a sanctified tradition. Some, going even further, wore the burqa. That's the headdress covering from the whole body, including the face. However, to hide the body in a tent-like gown and obscure facial features is a bizarre thing as it is cruel, especially when women are indoctrinated to falsely believe it was God who decreed such a shroud for them. Nevertheless, the predominant reason has more to do with the fact that their men are insecure and harbor a deep distrust of their women. Imposing the veil or the burqa suggests that men suspect their mothers, sisters, wives, and daughters of being potential traitors. Do they really think that women are inherently corrupt or easily seduced? How can Muslim men meet other women who are not veiled and treat them respectfully and not accord the same respectful treatment to women in their own families? Previously, there was no compulsion to wear restrictive clothing, even in Islamic countries. But now those women who do not wear it are often derided for being not Muslim enough. The wearing of the burqa and the veil are now seen as Islamic symbols, but the Quran does not say anything about wearing of either. It stipulates only modest dress for both men and women. The hijab and the veil or the burqa are not Quranic decrees and they're not Islamic, but cultural and fashion statements that have root in tribal traditions of a bygone age. So whether a woman chooses to wear any one of these or not is a choice, but it's not stipulated by the Quran.
Wow, okay. So usually, by choice. And so at the core of this is the insecurity that, maybe they don't want other men to see the face of their women, or, there's that insecurity or lack of trust at the core of
lack
this.
of trust. Yeah, the men who don't trust their women, they think that they're going to be traitors to them. They're going to be easily seduced. They are covering their women from head to foot, so that they can't be seen and they can't see outside. It's a ridiculous situation.
Okay, so another practice is, the beard. Everyone wears big beards now. It's almost like a fashion statement. But originally, I often see like Muslims have to grow their beards the way you have like Rastafarians grow their hair and they will not cut their hair.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if there's a religious connotation to this beard growth, or just a fashion statement.
Well, beards were, as they are now, common in times of where cultures there were fashions or shaving wasn't practical everyday event. Now we can just wake up, go up to the bathroom and have a shave, but there were times when you couldn't do that. But the thing is this. Traditionalists today think that keeping a beard is an act of piety that earns rewards and is a label of intent for Muslims so that they can be recognized as Muslims. If this indeed was the case, then many Native Americans and all the Eskimos, in Arctic, and all the women would lose out on this virtue because they can't keep a beard. There's lots of people that don't have beards or can't keep beards for one reason or another. So what happens to them? Are they not pious? Are they not good enough for anything? The Quran says that all believing men and women are equal, and it is only acts of righteousness that defines exalted characters. So if you have good conduct, then you're an exalted character. Nothing to do with the beard. So while many may add, the beard might add something to your image, or your style, or the length and color of your beard, whatever it is, it doesn't determine your sincerity or your integrity as a Muslim. And it's certainly not an obligation, and there's nothing in the Quran to say that.
Okay, yeah. It's very strange how people interpret, these religious books, and we have the same issue with in Christianity as well. The Bible has different interpretation to suit particular church, depending on what they are preaching to people. And
but definitely there's nothing in the Quran.
Okay, and in Christian doctrine, for example, one of these type of practices is the tithe. So in the Islamic doctrine, I understand there's a similar thing that is called zakat or alms giving. So I was wondering, it's been referred to as one of the pillars of Islam. Is this mandated in Quran, or is this another interpretation of what people perceive?
Okay, well, zakah is another word that's been poorly interpreted again. Zakah doesn't mean charity. In the Quran, the word zakah is used for purity. Now, even the traditional translations occasionally translate zakah as purity, but most of the time they translate it as charity, but that's not what it means. Purity is an essential condition to help individuals grow, develop, and progress. Therefore, keeping your commitments and obligations pure and uncontaminated is an important part of life, because genuine sincerity cannot exist when mixed with polluted ideas. Charity is not mandated in the Quran because the Quran decrees a social welfare system that has far-reaching effects. The analogy would be to give a man a fish and feed him for a day, show him how to fish and feed him for life. So when there is natural man-made disasters in a poor country, say, rich Western countries rush to help with aid, but this destroys the economy and the people and the country. What should happen is that people who are business-minded, they should be given soft loans so that they can open up businesses, and people should be given basic incomes so that they can buy the stuff to kickstart the economy. So this is what's really needed, is the basic minimum wage as a right to every citizen. And this is a share of the social wealth earned from natural resources, manufacturing and services from the country. Soft loans to entrepreneurs and business people. This would kickstart the economy and everyone would benefit. We need a system where people need to be looked after and then dignity prevails, because charity does not offer that kind of dignity and self-respect which an earning person can have.
I couldn't agree with you more, because I always say this about charity, whether it's BBC Children in Need, where they will send someone to Uganda and then there will be a video of kids with flies all over his face, and they will say, oh, this kid has to walk 10 miles to fetch water and things like that.
Exactly.
And then they will now bring a mosquito net. The following year, they will come with mosquito net. The following year, they will come with mosquito net. So there is not really an uptick. There is not really an improvement. So I don't support charity. I find it quite interesting that in the Quran, it does not promote charity, because that's not empowering. There's no dignity in constantly trying to spoon feed someone.
Exactly. Now, all these things I've discussed in a lot of detail in my book, which you showed earlier.
Yes.
And it will show you that we need a proper system in place which helps everybody, people without income, people with income, people with businesses, so that we have a fair and just system where everybody's dignity is equal, and not some people are more dignified than others just because they have money. And the thing is there are certain basic needs that we have, like food and shelter, and healthcare. All these things should be provided for by the state, which is raking in millions from taxes and other resources. See, for example, this January, just a few days ago, it was in the news that the U.S. government, President Biden, he signed off $777.7 billion for the army, for the military budget. And that's in a country where they still have homeless people, they still have poor people, they still have a poor health service where it's all insurance backed rather than state backed. So in a country where all this is happening, they have enough money to allocate for fighting wars. America is not at war with anybody. There's no imminent war going to happen. But still it's allocating this amount of money where it could be spending it on its people. It's not the lack of money that's doing these things. It's a lack of will and the lack of intent.
Yes, and the more they put that kind of budget in the military apparatus, the more people will be motivated to fight war, because someone has to use that. The more you use the equipment, the more they will need to replenish.
Exactly.
In Christianity, especially Catholic, we do not have like a stated pilgrimage. Although some people do go to Vatican, but there's no like a ceremonial element to it. And but in Islam, most people like to go to Mecca. And I was wondering, what is the context of this pilgrimage with regards to Quran? And can you elaborate on this, please?
Okay. See, the word Hajj is another word like zakah, which has been very badly misinterpreted. Now, the rite of pilgrimage, according to the Quran, is one of the most damaging ideas in religion. For a journey to a supposed holy place, millions of people gather to perform trite rituals with a single egotistical aim of attaining salvation only for themselves. Many hope to die there, as hundreds of pilgrims do each year, in a hope of martyrdom and a first-class ticket to heaven. Nothing could be more selfish than that. There are two types of pilgrimage according to the Sunni religion. The greater, known as the Hajj, following Ramadan, and the lesser, known as the Umrah, which can be performed at any time of the year. These add an estimated 9 billion a year to the Saudi GDP. That is about 20% of the Saudi kingdom's non-oil GDP and 7% of the total GDP. Hajj alone contributes about 4.5 billion, and experts believe that revenue from pilgrimage will top 100 billion by 2022. But COVID might change this figure. You know what's happening just now. Because of this mistaken belief, the pilgrimage is decreed by God. People believe that God decreed this, but God did not do this. People consider it as an act of ultimate piety and may use their life savings despite their poor living conditions. 1 year's income from pilgrimage trade could alone change the lives of all the citizens in any one country each year. For example, in Bangladesh, which is a very, very poor country and is frequently devastated by floods, the poverty in some areas is unimaginable, with dire living conditions, crude sanitation, no running water or electricity. Truly a life of hell for these people. When God talks about social welfare in the Quran, he means to balance society and close the gaps created by the disparity of poor distribution of wealth, not only locally, but also globally. That is why it says that people should spend their money on social welfare. Money spent on pilgrimage might satisfy a person's inner desire and gives them emotional comfort. But this is false hope, because according to the Quran, it is the act of facing and overcoming life's real challenges that develop the self, and not such selfish acts of fulfilling rituals in order to gain passage to heaven. In reality, such rituals as pilgrimages are an economic exploitation of society. The money spent on pilgrimages and mosques can be better spent on building hospitals, schools, universities, libraries, community healthcare, and so on. The countries that send the most pilgrimages are probably the ones that need these facilities the most. The Quran's concept is to balance society, and that is why the concept of social welfare is important. Those in a position to do so are obliged to contribute from their income. The word the Quran uses to describe this expenditure is anfaq. This can be a portion of your money set aside for directly helping those in need, and also a tax paid to the central government for the maintenance of a national welfare system. So to expend yourself and your money from what God has bestowed upon you and to stamp out poverty, hunger, and poor living standards is a challenge that you really need to undertake, not Hajj, not pilgrimage. To stop slavery, dowry, oppression is what people should strive for. To fight against aggression and injustices around the world is the challenge people should stand up for. And now that would be taking a real challenge. And the word Hajj actually means to confront something or to challenge something. So that is Hajj according to the Quran, is to overcome your challenges in life.
Yeah, the financial element of religion is what I've always been speaking out against for a long time, and I've had intense debates, with people, especially my countrymen, about this, and they will tell me, if this pastor has like 5 private jets, what's wrong with that? Having prosperity is not a bad thing. God didn't say you should be poor.
Well, sorry to cut in, but I was going to say that, people believe that it's not a bad thing to be rich. No, nobody's saying that. What price is happiness? How can you be happy if people around you are living in dire poverty? And how is that happiness achieved? If it's achieved by wrongful means, is that really happiness then? Is that how people perceive happiness to be? What God is saying, that we need some balance in it. Nobody is saying that you should give all your wealth away and you should live a life of destitute. No, that's not the case. What we're saying is that people should have at least basic needs, which is housing, healthcare, food, shelter, all these kind of things, And for people to be rich is fine. If they want a good car, fine. If they want a better house, fine. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yes, I'll give you an example. There's a pastor in Nigeria of a big church. Now, I think he's almost reaching the Guinness Book of World Record of having a church that will accommodate up to 1 million people. So this church is the overseer of this church. It's almost, they run churches in Nigeria like a franchise. All these churches are in Nigeria, they're in UK, America, are around the world. And one of the junior pastors for this overseer was fired. And he was fired because he's not bringing in enough money.
All right. So he was not a good salesman.
He was not reaching the target in terms of motivating the congregation to bring in tithe or, having that skills. And not really how many souls he has saved, how many people come to church because it's the last, I believe in God. Even though I criticize religion, I believe in God because there are certain moments in my life where within the confines of my home, I will kneel down and pray to God. And that will be my last solace, my last hope, to console me at those moments. And that's the point of religion, but there's always the financial element that is revolving around this, which gets me angry. So that man was fired, the pastor was fired, and the house, the flat that the church gave him was taken back from him. And the man was having an interview and his family, is stranded. So what kind of church is this? What kind of religion is this? What kind of God are we worshiping? And I always say, just 1 second, please. I always say that, like what you said, I'm not opposed to people having money or having private jets. But for me, any pastor that has 2-3 private jets is no longer a man of God, because even Jesus Christ in his days, I always say this and people will laugh, in his days was going around on donkey. Maybe horses were the Lamborghini or Ferrari of those days, but he wasn't using horses. Instead, he was chasing away traders from the churches. So what they are doing now is what gets me angry, especially from Nigerian context. Please go ahead.
This is just going back to what we said about the churches being decked with gold and silver, mosques being decked with gold and silver. I was watching a program on TV just the other day. It was about the Golden Temple in Amritsar, the Sikh. Now, the Golden Temple is real gold, there's so much gold on this place that's unimaginable, how much it might be worth. But this is in a world where there's so much poverty. Children are dying because they don't have health care, because they don't have food, basic things like that, And then we talk about, loving God. How can we say we love God when we have so much poor circumstances around us all the time?
Yes, and so I just wanted to go back to the Quran a little bit. And the original text of Quran is in Arabic. However, something I've learned from your book is that there has been some form of divergence or some form of disparity between the spoken Arabic and the Arabic in the Quran. I just wanted you to talk a little bit about this.
Well, looking back into history, people will see that the spoken Arabic and the Arabic in the Quran has moved along parallel routes. The Arabic that is spoken today is a result of many changes that have shaped the language through its evolution. The vernacular we hear today in the Middle East bears little resemblance, not least in structure and vocabulary, to the common Arabic of yesteryear. In the case of spoken Arabic, it transmuted into a concept language. But there is nothing wrong in this, because this is how living languages naturally evolve and develop as they are enriched by culture. So, however, such a progress would be detrimental to a language that seeks to disseminate absolute principles of moral and ethical standards. This is why the Arabic of the Quran has remained static and encapsulated to retain its essential purity. This means that the rules and the vocabulary too are living in their original form. This durability has ensured that the message is received intact and without change. The reliability maintains the Quran's precision and incisiveness. The Quran imparts universal permanent values and absolute laws. So to possess these qualities is crucial. Otherwise, it would not be the precise and dependable message that it is. Is it not strange that it appears easy to understand ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, but not the Quran? In fact, the Arabic in the Quran, which is very modern scripture by comparison, is much easier to decode than the pictograms of ancient Egypt. When decoding the hieroglyphics, there is no supplementary text used to understand it. So why can this method not be used to understand the Quran as well? When we do use the Quran's own rules and text to understand it, the meaning of the Quranic words becomes consistent, resulting in accurate and clear interpretation. However, using the spurious hadith, and we can go on to the hadith later on, to explain the Quran has impressed certain misleading meanings for many words, and this has made the Quran apparently a difficult and confusing book that no longer can be seen as a guidance for mankind that it's meant to be. In order to establish the true message of the Quran, it's necessary to uncover and use its unchanging system, which stands firm on the root letters. It has these to fortify its foundation and validate its veracity. The root system of the Arabic language is an unfamiliar concept to many people. Even many scholars don't seem to grasp this essential fact of how Arabic words are constructed. This is one of the reasons why the Quran is often poorly translated. In Arabic, all words are made from a few component letters, commonly called a root. A root usually consists of 3, sometimes 2 or 4, which define the meaning of all the words from that root. By adding various vowels to change the pronunciation as affixes, associated meanings can be derived. For example, the Arabic letter SLM from the root words for salam, which means peace or harmony, and by conforming and submitting to a social order. Islam, which is made from the same SLM, is a state of harmony, and the word Muslim, which is from the same root SLM, it means somebody who acts in harmony and conforms to these laws. So you will see from this one root of SLM, we get 3 words which don't look the same, but they are from the same root, which is Salam, Islam, and Muslim. Arabic words are therefore made by using word elements such as a prefix, which is in front of a word, an infix, which is inside a word, and a suffix, which is at the end of the word. So these are attached to the base root, and then the rest of the words can be made. So in a root language, and the derivatives of that word mean that they're built from other words. So all words are built from different words. These words are called roots. Now, while many languages, like the English language, for example, is a concept-based language, there are some words that can be likened to the root system. For example, if we learn that the word obligation means that you should have no problem knowing what the word obligate or oblige means, because they're from the same root. So you use the same root to understand that the word is built from that root. Also, loan words from other languages that are root-based can show how this works. If you learn that the Greek root word chronos, in English it's chronic, means time, then you should have no problem realizing that chronicle and synchronize are made from this root as well. You can use a root of chronos to realize that chronicle and synchronize mean something to do with time as well. So the important point to understand here is that the essential meaning does not change. One root can have many different words, but the essence of the meaning stays the same. Classical Arabic, as used in the Quran as one of the most primitive Semitic Arabic, as used in the Quran, is one of the, it has words get the meaning from the root they're built from, rather than by associating a concept with the word, as you would in a concept language. This gives Quranic Arabic a crystal clear aspect to it. There is no ambiguity or confusion in classical Arabic sentences. The language is one of clarity, directness, and certainty, qualities that are hard to achieve in other languages. This means that the same word or derivatives from the same root cannot have different meanings. The essence of the word and the meanings always remain secure to the same root. The Arabic in the Quran is clear and precise language. It is a highly developed instrument of communication that allows it to express its importance concept with high level of accuracy. This is, is going back to what we were talking about last time when we were saying that can the Quran be interpreted in different ways, and what's the interpretation of the Quran? It's because of this precise rule that you cannot interpret Arabic in different ways.
This rule of the root words.
Exactly.
Okay. Wow. So, but I was wondering, so there's a possibility that most imams, all those clerics, might not be aware of this to this depth.
Well, if they are aware of it, they don't want other people to be aware of it, because what would happen is if they started using this and other people knew about this, then the traditional translation would fall apart, because they're based on the basis that one word can have 2, 3, or 6, or half a dozen, or a dozen different meanings. You know, so if one word in the Quran occurs several times, like the word zakah, in the traditional translations is translated as charity some places and as purity in some places. So they're saying that this word has 2 different meanings, where it can't have that according to the root word.
Wow.
You see that?
Yes.
So
yes.
if they use this rule, then that word charity could not be translated. The root zakat could not be translated as charity. It would have to be translated as pure everywhere.
You wrote in your book about self-reference, your book, Quran, God's Message to Mankind, about self-reference. And I would like you to elaborate on this, please.
First of all, we're all familiar with barcodes. We all know, we all see barcodes. We see them everywhere. And when we go shopping on products, on packaging, on books, other materials, documents, everything, we see barcodes everywhere. Now, the thing is this, when I first started publishing in the 80s, in the mid 80s, we had to apply for what we call an ISBN number, which is International Standard Book Numbering System, right? So in those days, we would only get one number, and any following subsequent numbers, we had to work out ourselves. And there was instructions on how to do this. And if you look at the barcode, you will see on the right-hand side, there's a standalone number. There's one number, the standalone number. Now, once we had made up the number, and when we put the last number in, that would tell us whether the rest of the numbers were correct or not. That was called the check digit. And it would tell us if all the other numbers that were to the left of that number were correct or not. So we used, that's the system that we used. And even today it's true, although when you apply for numbers, they'll give you a raft of numbers, what you buy, but they won't explain to you how it's done. They used to do that before. So if you look at that, we can see that in the barcode, there's a check digit, there's a self-reference that tells you whether everything else is correct or not. And that applies to the Quran as well. And the way it applies is this, okay? So there are sentences, words in the Quran, which tell you if the structure of the Quran is correct or not, if the whole structure is correct or not. If you were to take these sentences or these words out or change them in any way, then the structure would fall apart as well. That's why it's called self-reference. So it's basically, technically you can call it self-reference, but all it is a check digit, check words or check sentences. And the way it works is this: when we say a word, we can either say what the word is, the mention of words or the use of words. Because if you have a paragraph, you can say that the word is mentioned so many times in the paragraph, or you can say the use of words is this. Let me explain this a little bit further. So self-reference takes into consideration the use and the mention of words. When you use a word, it's the meaning of the word that is implied. When you mention a word, you're talking about the word and not its meaning. Every sentence can thus talk about words it is using or the meaning of the word. As an example of mentioning the words, if I say youth comes before manhood, it would be logically incorrect unless specified. The reason being that in a dictionary, manhood, the word and not the meaning, comes before youth. The word, you see that now? Mm-hmm. So since the Quran talks about numerous things and uses many words, often repeating them many, many times, if the author of the Quran was a man or a group of men, we should have lots of opportunities to find such logical errors of self-reference in the book. However, we discover something amazing when we apply the self-reference check. Okay, for example, if we could, I'm going to use a Christian missionary's example now. If we say there is a mistake in the Bible to Billy Graham, for example, the famous Bible thumper, yeah. For example, he may respond, no, there's no mistake in the Bible. Show me a mistake. a mistake could logically be shown by reading a passage like David made a mistake. The word mistake is in the Bible. Right? Now, if the Bible were to say there is no mistake in this book, it could be falsified or disproved logically by that first example. It's not a trick. It involves delicate matters of logic. However, safely for now, the Bible never makes such a claim, but the Quran does. Okay?
Yeah.
So what the Quran says is, why do they not study and consider the Quran with care? If it were from any other than God, they would have found in it many contradictions. That's what the Quran is saying. The Quran is saying that if the Quran was not from God, then they would find lots of contradictions in it. So that's a clear statement. The meaning of the statement, use of words is clear, considering the nature of the book and its diverse topics and areas of discussion. If the book had a human origin, it would be easy to find discrepancies in it. If we consider the mention of the words, a different picture emerges. We can see if the word passes its own falsification test. For example, I have to explain this a little bit further. See, I think a lot of the work for this is done by another guy. I didn't actually do the counting, for this. I used the references which I found in a book called Al-Mujim al-Murfahis. This is by a guy called Fahd Abdul Baki. He did all the legwork in this instance. And for example, the Quran is saying that the evil, al-khabis, and the good are not alike. Now, in most of the verses, the Quran is saying, for example, Jesus is like Adam. And when it says Jesus is like Adam, not only does it mention Jesus 25 times, it mentions Adam 25 times as well. So not only is Adam and Jesus similar in other nature, but they are also similar in the fact that they both mentioned 25 times in the Quran. Now, then it says that the blind and the seeing are not alike. So it doesn't, so if it had the blind 8 times and the seeing 8 times, then they would be alike. But that's not what the Quran does. The Quran mentions blind 8 times and seeing 9 times. So not are the blind and the seeing not alike in many other ways, but they're not even alike in the way that they're mentioned in the Quran. One is mentioned 8 times and one is mentioned 9 times. Right? So then it says that it goes on, and if you start counting the word evil and the word good, for example, the evil is mentioned 16 times and the good is mentioned 7 times. It says that the word evil is mentioned 7 and the word good is mentioned, the word evil is mentioned 16 times, the good is mentioned 17 times. So according to the trend, the negative evil should be less than the positive. If you go by the logic of what the Quran is saying, then you should say that the evil should be less than the positive, than the good. How come the evil is more than what it should be? Has the Quran failed? If we cut off the statement in the middle of the sentence, the verse needs to be read in full. Proclaim the evil and the good are not alike. Even if the abundance of evil amazes you, you shall fulfill your duty to God, those who possess intelligence and understand that you may succeed. So the thing is this, if we are careful, just as I mentioned in the above statement, we notice that God's joined together all the evils, the evil, our evil, all the evils in the Quran are heaped together. And he says that even if you heap the evils together and you're amazed and impressed by the evil, it's still not better than the good. No matter how much evil you see, we see that in our life all around us. We see that so much evil around and not enough good around. So even if we're drawn to the evil and we're amazed by the evil, it's still not better than the good. Good is still worth far more than the evil. And that's what this really means. So this shows that the Quran is quite unique in that respect, the self-reference and the way that it shows the self-reference to be. But it takes a bit of time and thought, to do all this work. to get to the root of it, you know. So, but a man, how could a man or a group of men have produced such a mathematic and logically sound book without having any formal education in logic, mathematics, and no computer software and no indexes or anything description at all, you know? Remember, the Quran was revealed over a period of 23 years. So if you started writing something in year 1 and in year 7, would you remember what you wrote back in year 1 or what you're going to write in year 20? You know,
no.
That wouldn't be possible.
I've always wanted to ask this, and the same with Bible as well. Who wrote the Quran? Do we know who wrote this holy book?
Well, Muslims believe that the Quran is God's word verbatim. Now, other people might not share this view, but the fact that it's one of the most widely read books in the world and it's influenced lots of people, it's worth a read. So detractors of Islam might say, oh, Muhammad wrote it. But as I've explained to you, a man in a desert could not have compiled this simply for the reason of the way it's structured. The purity of the language, the structure of the language, the self-reference system, the scientific facts. There are so many things that if brought together, it makes it impossible for one single man to have written it. And the thing is, all this information should have been available at that time for it to have been written. So some of the things that were information people didn't know or weren't aware of. So how could they have done it without a computer, without an index system, without the libraries, without the Google, no Google to search for it in those days. So how did they do it? So for Muslims, it's a book which is revealed by God. He is the author of the book. And and there are different reasons why we can understand that, because the way the Quran, for example, is it talks about holistic things, not about individual single subject things. So, and then it connects all these things together. Personal life, social life. It talks about hard periods, war, peace, all these kind of things. And there isn't a book that talks about all these things together in such a way as the Quran does.
Wow, that's interesting. So there's a level of divine intervention or divine manifestation in that book. Exactly,
yes. Well, what I would say that there are a lot of people who may not have read the Quran, but they have very good qualities. They're exemplary characteristics. But reading the Quran would calibrate their values, and it would impress the divine blueprint on them, because it's the original. Although they may be good in character, but to align themselves with the Quran would add another layer of veracity to their belief.
You contemplated in your book, whether Quran has failed in its presentation or portrayal of the good versus evil. I think you've touched on this a little bit about the number of good versus evil, how it was mentioned, and how the overall good will never be more, better than, or how the overall evil will never be better than good, no matter how the quantity of it. And you distilled this, you touched this, but if you want to add a little bit more, you can add, about whether the Quran has failed.
Well, all I would say is that, the Quran is distilling the truth, it's distilling the values. The Quran's values are permanent values, not transient values, because the thing is that as human beings, as societies, we all have values of one type or another. But the thing is this, our values can be transient, because they may apply to us, but they don't necessarily apply to everybody else. Whereas the Quran's values do apply to individuals and societies altogether. And that's the difference, in the Quranic values as compared to the values which individuals might have.
Okay, so you talked about how Islam or Quran can give someone structure or value, because even if the person is a good person, if they read the Quran, or it will give them some level of guidance or calibration in their life to help better them. And that baffles me when I hear about Sharia law in Islam, and this is something that has been bugging me. I'm saying, because for me as a non-Muslim, what I see is that, are you really fighting for your God your God is supposed to be omnipotent, powerful God. Why can't the God choose to dispense punishment if he or she so chooses? But why do you fight? Because whenever I hear Sharia law, I hear, hanging people, chopping off people's hand, especially in the north of Nigeria. Can you talk about what's your views on Sharia law?
Okay. Well, I've just, this month, I have a publication which is called Sharia, Is It Fit for Britain? So I'll be happy to send you that book at some point. But
please,
the thing is usually Sharia, or Sharia law as it's commonly known, comes to our attention when there's a beheading of a prisoner in Saudi Arabia, the stoning to death of a woman somewhere in the Middle East, or the caning of an offender in Indonesia that is reported in the media. But Sharia is in fact much more than this. The practice of Sharia, the un-Quranic Sharia, exposes an internecine conflict that cannot be reconciled without people abandoning their deep-held belief in religious faith that has developed outside the Quran. So for many people who profess to be Muslims, Sharia is a reference point in all aspects of their life. However, the draconian laws imposed by the imams in the name of Sharia are in conflict with the Sharia mentioned in the Quran, as recognized by the Quran-centric reformers who see the un-Quranic Sharia for what it really is, a means of control and oppression of people who do not know the Quran. The Sharia in the Quran is very different to the Sharia that is now wrongly considered to be Islam's legal system and is in reality derived from Hadith, the deeds and sayings attributed to Muhammad that actually compiled some 200 years after his death. Now, Sharia dictates not only harsh punishment, but also rules and many personal and public aspects of life, such as prayer, fasting, charity, business, personal relationships, finance, dress, food, art, personal hygiene, and so on and on. Sharia can inform every aspect of a person's life. It has been made into a complete structure and one that many sincere but ill-informed people find difficult to avoid. The general rule of do not forbid what God has not is set aside, and the need for Sharia compliance and certification has been created to such an extent that it generates a vast amount of cash. It is predicted that it will produce 9 trillion economy by the year 2025, just by making products and services that used to be halal products halal that could previously be consumed without any official qualification. So now we will have a host of things that these Sharia councils have made halal, but which were halal before anyway. So they've done this in order to give the certification and to make money. The Quran strictly forbids the taking of authorities as equal to God. So if God has made something halal, nobody else needs to make it halal or haram. This principle is violated when people follow decrees of their imams that clearly conflict with the Quran, which is God's word. For Sunnis, there are 4 imams, the Hanbali, the Maliki, the Shafi, the Hanfi, 2 decrees for them tenets of the faith. Since these imams have long passed away, they now refer to more recent successors for the guidance. The Shias have their own group of imams which they follow. So what kind of guidance do people look for? A person wondering what to do if their colleague invites them to an office get-together after work may turn to a Sharia scholar for advice to ensure they act within the Sharia code and its limiters known as Hudud or Had. It is these jurists who issue guidance and rulings. Any guidance that is considered a formal legal ruling is called a fatwa. That's the kind of fatwa which we're talking about earlier on. The unfortunate thing is that often this guidance has no basis in the Quran. The Quran mentions Sharia 5 times, but this is in relation to the decrees of God. Sharia means decree, directive, or law of God. The word has been shamelessly hijacked by those who wish to control and manipulate a large ignorant population by not only threatening them with fire and brimstone, but also harsh punishments in this life. We can see that these threats and punishments are actually carried out. The stoning of women who have been accused of adultery as a prime example. Is it any wonder that in recent years, some Western analysts have identified Sharia religious law as a growing threat? These analysts say that any adoption of Sharia's tenets is a strategic extremists are using to transform their countries into Islamic states. It's true that many religious activists are seeking to instill Sharia laws into British and a European legal system, or to get some recognition and legitimacy. So we must now ask if the Sharia is fit for modern Europe. So unquestionably, Sharia law conflicts with the Quran will be detrimental to any civilized society, and we must oppose this. But to do that effectively, we need to understand what Sharia law from the Quran really means. So we've got to understand the Quran, first of all, what the Sharia in the Quran says. These are God's laws, and what the Sharia that's been hijacked and made into a different law about the punishments that you were talking about earlier on. These are the ones that we have to reject.
So, in other words, Sharia law, is it regarded as a law in Quran? Is it that word specifically, law? Is it a law in Quran?
Not in the Quran. In the Quran, there is no Sharia law, but in tradition, there is Sharia law.
Okay.
And these are the ones which are used by the priest to hand out the punishments that we're talking about earlier, for adultery, for theft, for other things like that as well.
Okay.
Like the hand chopping. And see, can I just make another point about this, about the hand chopping as well? There is no hand chopping in the Quran. What the Quran is talking about is a metaphor. When it says that it's just like if I asked you to do something, you say, "Oh no, I'm tired today, I can't do this." That doesn't mean to say that somebody's bound you in a chair and you can't move. It just means that you're not able to do it because you've got other things to do. So in the Quran, it's about the not severing of the hand, but the cutting of the resources of a person so that they don't have the ability to commit any crime. That's what it means.
Wow.
Not the chopping of the hand. That's been changed by the hadith into the chopping of the hands, not according to the Quran.
So this is like the interpretation is very literal instead of the going deeper.
Exactly. They've literally interpreted instead of the metaphor it uses. It's about saying that, cut off the resources of this person. If a person is stealing, cut off their resources so they cannot do such harm.
Okay. So in your explanation of this, I'll go on a little tangent. You mentioned halal and haram. I just wanted you to, for a non-Muslim, because if I want to go and buy meat, I always buy the halal because my understanding is like it's fresh and it's not like, it's somewhat cleaner meat. But what is it in terms of Islam? The halal, what the certification? It says something about certification and.
No. See the word halal from the Quran. All it means is permitted. That's all it means.
Wow. Okay.
If God is permitting something for you, He says this is halal. Or if it's forbidding something, we say this is haram. Okay. Haram means forbidden. Halal means forbidden. So the Quran is only forbidding, a very few things actually, in food, hardly anything. And people are taking the word halal to be a ritual slaughter. That's not what it means. There is no ritual slaughter in the Quran. There is none at all. What they're saying is that in order for an animal to be halal, it has to be slaughtered in a particular way and a prayer has to be said. But it's impossible to do that, impossible to check that. That's not what the Quran is saying. It's just saying that, let's say, for example, in the Quran it's saying that the kind of food which is forbidden is animals that die of themselves. That's obvious because animals that die of themselves could have died of disease. So you don't want to be eating the disease animal. Animal running blood, because blood is detrimental when you're eating it, if you make something out of it. And the other thing which is forbidden is the meat of a pig. Now, people get confused with it. They think that meat of a pig is forbidden because pig is a dirty animal. Pig is not a dirty animal. Pig is an okay animal. But the reason why it's forbidden is because of its closeness in genetics to human beings. If you go to South Pacific, you will see people who eat, who are cannibals, and they eat pig as well. They say that human meat tastes like pig.
Wow.
Very like pig. And they call human beings long pig. They call human beings long pig in South Pacific. And not only that, did you know last week there was a human heart transplanted from a pig to a human being? The only reason why they could do it is because a pig's part will not be rejected by a human being.
Okay.
It's so close, it will not be rejected. So to eat a pig, it would be like cannibalism, almost.
Wow. Okay, now I understand, because I used to think is because of the dirtiness and close to the mud, how dirty It is, but now it's much
No, it's
clearer.
not. It's a very clean animal, in fact. So, but the reason why is because it's very very close genetically to human beings.
Okay, wow, that's good to understand this. Okay,
So
so
and people are saying, now we have in Europe and Australia and many countries, we've got halal councils who issue out certificates to businesses who want to sell halal products, and whether it's halal or not. It's not only for food, but this is also for banking, for art, for candles, for clothing, for different things. It's a mix and nonsense of the thing. The principle is, if God hasn't forbidden it, don't let anybody else do that for you.
wow, yes. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about hatred of non-Muslims. For example, in Nigeria, there's always hatred of non-Muslims, especially in the north. There's a lot of killing of Christians and things like that, and other people. And this has resulted in the killing of several Christians, even non-Muslims that are not Christians, or people that don't really believe in anything. And obviously, there are a set of ideologies that Islam's believe in that will prompt this. But can you talk about this? What is fueling this hatred?
Okay. Well, it's not the Quran that's fueling the hatred. It's the people that are fueling this hatred. As a society grows, diverse, bringing different cultures and traditions into the mix, as well as alien beliefs, is a natural consequence that some fear and suspicion arises. However, people, even from diverse cultures and beliefs, are not that different. We all need the same things to live in peace and security, and that means some same core values and ethical standards. So when religion removes its dress codes and rites and rituals, it must rely on universal permanent values. And it is these enduring principles of life that bring people together. So individuals are ultimately defined by their conduct, not by their dress, not by their diet, not by their rituals, customs, or traditions. So common values remove barriers and bring people together, whatever their background. If people are good, then it follows that society will also be good. A fractured society is a breeding ground for nefarious elements who create nothing but fear and turmoil. This is why religion, racism, nationalism are repugnant as ideas of superiority. It's extremism of all descriptions that is detrimental. And it is incumbent upon intelligent people to confront and refute and oppose all these regressive narratives before they totally destroy our harmony. A community that continually sees fear and turmoil and does nothing to alleviate the causes is at odds with its claim that it truly wants to create a cohesive society. So to ensure peace and security, just as we all need the same nutrients and the same air, we all need the same permanent values. And these are found in the Quran. This means that we have to challenge interpretations which are wrong, and we have to implement the universal values properly.
I mean, in Christianity, a lot of people can criticize, the Pope or Vatican. But in Islam, it's quite difficult to criticize the religion because it's quite it could be detrimental to your own life.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we've seen these examples in France, for example, last year, and even in this country, we've seen examples of people being killed because of religious difference and religious intolerance. But that's not what the Quran is saying. The Quran is giving you universal values to bring people together, and that doesn't depend on their culture or their color or their race or whatever. Nothing to do with that. What we're saying is this: these are differences that people have made themselves. It's nothing to do with the Quran. The Quran is not inciting hatred at all.
Yeah, so I will ask you the $1,000,000 question now. Like most people will criticize the religion, whether Islam or Christianity, in the sense that there's a lot of war that's associated with religion, Islam or Christianity. And so the question is, like, is it possible that religion or Islam can unite humanity? Is this possible?
Well, without unity, there can be no peace. That's for sure. So divisions based on religion, tribalism, nationalism, racism, and anything that cause as egregious maleficence must be reconciled. So in the absence of a universal way of life, humankind must remain divided into mutually hostile groups. Under such conditions, there can be no enduring peace, no permanent security for the individual, and no shared and lasting prosperity and happiness in the world. So the Quran, for this reason, constantly draws attention to the unity of humanity. The Quran destroys the notion of superiority based on religion, nationality, or race, and clearly states that the best among you are the foremost in good conduct. So the Quran places good conduct above everything else. So it's good conduct based on universal values that makes just and balanced society. This means for total peace and security, individuals must need to become benefactors of humanity. The Quran is a message that has meaning for individuals, but also it's got a far richer meaning for each person as a member of the global community. In the Quran, people who are foremost in good conduct and accept universal values are addressed as believers and not as Muslims, because Muslim is not a title, but a description of someone whose principles are founded on permanent values. So this is why taking Islam as a religion means that its fundamental position as a socio-economic model has not been understood. So Quran is not about religion. It's not about the superiority of culture or rituals of any description. It's about values, and it's universal values which the Quran is drawing people to come towards, so that everybody is on equal footing for as far as justice and good conduct is concerned.
So in other words, people to facilitate that unity and the unification of humanity is for Christians to actually look at the values that the Bible portrays, and for Muslims to actually look at the values that the Quran portrays.
Exactly. Can I explain this to you in a different way?
Yes.
Let's put it this way. People in Nigeria, in China, in America, in Europe, we're all eating different kinds of foods, but we need the same kind of nutrition. We need the same nutrition. If you are in Nigeria eating whatever local food there is, and I'm in India eating whatever local food it is, it doesn't matter what food you're eating. It doesn't matter what food I'm eating. We need the same nutrition from the different foods. So it doesn't matter whatever our cultures are, whatever we subscribe to, whether you're a Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, Sunni, Shia, whatever, you need the same values for truth and justice. You need the same values for peace and security. So we must discard our religious culture. We must discard our religious rituals, and we must take upon ourselves the universal values. That's what the Quran is saying, and that's what will bring us together. Nothing else.
Okay, so we've come to the end of the interview, but I was wondering, is there anything else you would like to add with regards to Islam, with regards to the Quran, and with regards to the interpretation of this holy book? Is there anything you would like to add to this?
Well, just to say that, the biggest setback for Muslims is that they don't understand the Quran the way it should be understood. So this is a really sad thing. As you know, Muslims are also divided into different sects, and the reason for this is simply because whatever culture they have, whatever understanding they have, or the interpretation they have, that's what they're using for their understanding. But it's making them divide. So if anything is making people divide, we know there's something wrong then. If something is bringing people together, we know that's something right. And I just reiterate, it's the values that we need to come together through, not through rituals, not through culture. We can have our own culture. There's no harm in that. There's nothing wrong with Indian culture or Polish culture or Middle Eastern culture. That's okay. But the values we have must be the same, because we need to give each other the same respect that we want ourselves as well, in order to get the justice that we need.
Mr. Paigham Mustafa, thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me on your program. Thank you.